How's everybody doing tonight? Sending a shout out to Chris Whitlock for joining. I know it's kind of late for him, so I appreciate the quick join. Shout out to Juanita Daly for joining. Greetings. You know how we do it. If you got any tech or cybersecurity questions, drop them in the chat. Uh, that was a good stream this afternoon, Chris. I enjoyed the risk register. Shout out to Regine, always supporting PBO. I appreciate you. We gonna get to it. It's late night with PBO. PBO was taking some AWS practice tests. They weren't going very well today, so we'll see what's going on. Once again, you know how we do it. If you got any tech questions or cybersecurity questions, shout out Ty. Shout out to Ty. Hit me in the chat. If anybody hit me on the email, I'm a little late on the email. I need to get on professorblackops@gmail.com. I'm a little late. I had a rough week and it's just Tuesday. Shout out to Jason. Thanks for joining. Give me one in the chat if you can hear me. Give me one in the chat if you can hear me. My new role will be dealing with the CTOs. CTOs know any? Yeah, I know a few CTOs. I usually don't get along with CTOs, so I don't know if I'm the person to ask that question. I do dealing with the CTOs. So yeah, I know a few. Um, as I got older, I just don't try to architect their architecture anymore. So I just do a compliance review of the CTOs. They don't like when I tell them their architecture is not very well. So lesson number one, do not attack the CTO. So I appreciate the ones. Shout out to Dr. Finesse. Thanks for joining me. Doing big things out there. You seeing everybody on LinkedIn putting in work. Let's go ahead and get started. You said in the NIST 800-53 revision 5 family supply chain risk management. It's pretty short. So yeah, we did a couple slides on top of that. That's kind of a unique family. King D, you know, yeah. So I usually just once again, when I deal with CTOs, most people know I do federal work, so usually I'm just talking about the compliance. Are they IRS compliant? Are they FISMA compliant? Or they're HIPAA high trust compliant? When I was younger, I used to try to help them architect their architecture. They don't like that. Shout out to me. Don't do that. Let's get going. Once again, y'all any tech questions, cybersecurity questions, just drop them in the box. Once again, here's the 20 security families of R5. You see it, the last one right there, SR, supply chain risk management. We are done. Let's wrap it up. Here's the subfamilies on there. Policies and procedures, supply chain risk management plan. I actually have to look that up. I don't know if I've ever done a supply chain risk management plan. I think that's new in R5, but R5 has been out for 3 years. I've never done a supply chain risk management plan. I've done risk management plan, assessment risk management plan. I've never done one off of supply chain though. Supply chain controls and process, SR provenance. Oh, struggling today. SR5 acquisition strategy, tools, and methods. From an acquisition standpoint, we talk about procurement. When we procure from the supply chain or basically from vendor management, the first thing is you see that 6 supplier assessment and reviews. Uh, Most of the times I do it from a vendor perspective, right? Vendor assessment and reviews. SR7, supply chain operations security. SR8, notification agreement. SR9, tamper resistance and detection. SR10, inspection of system or components. SR11, component authenticity. SR12, component disposal. So I think the big one really in there is 3, supply chain controls and process. 6, supplier assessments and reviews. I usually do that from a vendor perspective. And one thing I see people starting to ask for, just because of China's dropping malware on people's machines, where are you getting your components from, and what's the authenticity of those components? See if there's any questions in the box. Oh, got one in LinkedIn. The supply chain means specific controls for import and export companies. That is correct. And we're going to dig into their supply chain. You right, are specific components and things you get downstream to feed up. So one of the big things in there also is in one of the families is uh, what countries are those importer exporters from? Because there's a lot of countries we can't get components from. Iran and Iraq is in there. So yeah, that's definitely gonna be for your importer exporter companies. And there's some encryption we can't export out to different countries, right? Because we do that type of encryption and they might break it. Now, do I think those companies have those encryptions already? Why, yes, I do. But you can't be dropping FedRAMP or FIPS 140 encryption in Iran or Iraq, right? Those are our enemies out there. So once again, let me know if that answered your question, Jason. But that was an excellent question. Flaw remediation. Identify, report, and correct system flaws. Test software and firmware updates to flaw remediation for the effectiveness and potential side effects. Install security relevant software and firmware updates. Incorporate flaw remediation into the organization configuration management process. What makes this unique is, once again, we're talking about suppliers. Usually, if we're talking about vendors, right, they're in our loop. We know we have to do flaw remediation. We know we have to test it. We know we have to keep an eye on them. But when you talk about suppliers, once again, that's downstream. So, and the big one in there that I always struggle with is firmware. Right, I'm usually higher up in FedRAMP and databases and EC2s. I don't really talk about firmware very often, right? And really, when we talk about firmware, right, we're talking about keep an eye on it, make sure it's updated, make sure we're on the right version. And if the version we're on has flaws, right, how do we get those in test and development, get their firmware updated? Because before we update anything in production, we need to test it. Shout out to Adili. I advocate for a legacy and wealth building. Yeah, PBO be struggling, streaming, and broke. I appreciate you for joining me. So yeah, the big one in there, right, I think is flaw remediation, and what would that look like? SR3, supply chain control and process. It stops the process to identify and address weaknesses or deficiencies in the supply chain. Employ the following federal security controls to protect against supply chain risk. Document selected and implemented supply chain process and controls and security and privacy plans. Supply chain risk management plan, and once again, agency system security plan. So once again, we always talk about how many plans are in this. You see right there, control and security and privacy plan, supply chain risk management plan, and an agency system security plan. Right? So what would that look like? And what's the process, once again, delving into the supply chain? The cool thing we're going to touch on, if you're in the cloud, which everybody's trying to go to, is AWS is handling this, Google's handling this, and Azure is handling this, aka Microsoft, right? So we would actually get their plans and inherit their plans for how they're working, right? Because firmware, if we're in the cloud, they're handling all of that, right? They're uh, checking the authenticity, and we get their of their components to their servers and how they're using them. And I got a couple slides at the end talking about how AWS handles that, right? So we can check that box off and once again inherit it. But I always remember is you're responsible for your third party vendor, which will be AWS, Azure, or Google, right? So if they mess up, you're still responsible for that, right? So that's why you want to make sure you validate, check it, and make sure they're doing the right thing. The cool thing is the big guys trying to get federal work, so they're on it, but you still got to make sure you're doing that documentation properly for when you get audited, right? We do big systems and federal systems, right? So we always get audited. Provenance. This was unique to me. I really wasn't familiar with that. Document, monitor, and maintain valid provenance of the following system components, and associate data. Every system and system component has a point of origin and may change throughout its existence. Provenance is the chronological of the origin of development, ownership, location, and changes to the system and system components associated with the data. All right. So, what was the origin of the components? Where did the components come from? Who's building those components? And once again, checking the time lapse and what order you get it and how did you assemble those together. Right. So that's kind of a unique one. I appreciate that. The salute. I appreciate that. So once again, we like to go over the actual individual security families. We want to delve into it, right? This is the boring history and the building of your skill set, right? The only reason you learn these a lot of times is you actually have to read the documentation and configure them. Shout out to Chris. We talking about doing more labs so we can put some real world options into it. And shout out to Dr. Finesse. He's always talking about doing labs and let's put some rubber where the rubber meets the road type thing. So that's what I'm hoping to do coming up, and we'll see. Though. Once again, province, right? The origin, the chronological things. When did you order the motherboard? When did the motherboard pick in? What countries and who touched it, right? What's the origins of it? Who's the ownership of that particular company where you got that motherboard? Did you get it from China and they already dropped malware on it before they even sent it to the United States? Right. So those are some things you have to worry about. So let's keep going. SR5 acquisition strategy tools and methods. Employ the following acquisition strategies, contract tools, procurement methods to protect against, identify, and mitigate supply chain risk. The use of the acquisition process provides an important vehicle to protect the supply chain. There are many useful tools and techniques for that. So one thing I see more and more is the security being intertwined with procurement. Before anything bought, where are you buying it from? What's the security level of the company? Where are these companies buying these motherboards for? You ordering laptops, where are they getting these motherboards from, right? Are you ordering from Lenovo? That's a Chinese company, right? Where are you getting these components from? And before you buy those acquisitions, right, they should be looked at from a privacy perspective and also a cybersecurity perspective. Let me check out my LinkedIn. Appreciate Juanita for joining. Jason Cintron. Hopefully, I'm saying your name right. I see y'all over there. Let me give you a couple of likes. Does the supply chain means? Yep, I answered that. Yep, sir. So, yep, I appreciate you. I think me and Juanita going LinkedIn and introduce, and I think they want me to do a little talk in front of a class. Most people know probably Juanita. I taught 10 years at a very large community college, so I'm very familiar with that. Once again, that acquisition strategy, and I got a video on procurement, and I do that a lot. Used to do that a lot. So before anything came into the state agency where I was consulted, I review all software. Um, Once again, we report it to the IRS. Do they meet IRS standards? Laptops, is it BitLocker? What level encryption? Is it FIPS 140-2, which means that encryption has been signed off by the government? But from that acquisition strategy, right, you don't want to buy it and try to figure out later if it's secure, right? So we try to get it, like they said, province at the origin when we buy it. Once again, we can do our security checks and make sure everything is cool and copacetic in the security realm. So let's keep going. SR6, supplier assessment and reviews. Assess and review supply chain related risks associated with the supplier or contractor, the system components, and system service they provide. You want to do that at a minimum annually, every 12 months. An assessment review of supplier risk includes security and supply chain risk management process, This is a big one we see now. We were just talking about that with Iraq and Iran. What's the foreign ownership of the company? All right. So I see that if people talk about questions to vendors, questions to suppliers, what's your ownership breakdown? Especially foreign ownership, what does that look like? Control or influence, the ability of the supplier to effectively assess its subordinate second tier, third tier supplier and contractors. Right, you want to do a risk assessment to make sure they're doing a risk assessment of, once again, of their vendors and their suppliers to make sure they're doing the right thing. Right, each level you go down, you as a vendor or client, you loses visibility into your supply chain or your vendor. Right, your vendors have sub vendors and vendors they're using, right? So a lot of times, depending on the level of security of what we're doing, we ask them who their sub vendors are and what software they're using from their sub vendors so we can do a security clearance on it. Right, if it's HIPAA, high trust, hospital, high level security, there's low, moderate, high, any high. If it's high level, I'm asking you who's your suppliers, your sub suppliers, and your sub vendors. What software are you using that touch the data I'm giving to you? Because I actually want to look at those sub vendors. We don't want to be declared negligent if something happened, right? And we get sued and we get stuck. Oh, Ty, we'll see what Ty got. With those moving about around, IRS will be affected. Oh, most definitely. I think everybody's going to be affected. I think Doge is cutting resources and manpower, so I think everybody's trying to figure out what that's going to do and how you're going to handle it. Shout out to Before the Billions. Let's see. I dropped the link if anybody want to come up. I think this is pretty short. Supplier family. Hope that's not it. Yeah, invite the guest. Here, let me. If anybody wants to come up, once again, supply chain operation security. Once again, like we talked about, the operation sec expands for scope of the OPSEC to include suppliers and potential suppliers. OPSEC is in the process of including identifying critical information, analyzing friendly actions related to operation and other activities to identify actions that can be observed by potential adversaries. So once again, your suppliers and your sub suppliers, your OPSEC, Operations Security Department. A lot of companies don't have that. That would file to GRC or your security department. But once again, who's checking your suppliers? A lot of times, let's be realistic. That's a lot of times that's going to be a paper check, and a lot of times, from a compliance standpoint, we're just trying to check the box so we're not negligent. So we would ask our suppliers, who's your sub suppliers? Are you doing security reviews on them, assessment? Are they in the FedRAMP data center? Right. So we would give our suppliers a vendor questionnaire or a supplier questionnaire. And I got a slide talking about what's the difference between a vendor and a supplier. I've actually was using that interchangeable, and I think that was a mistake. So what's the difference? That slide is coming up. Once again, the supply chains, operation security. I think if you're not a very mature organization, you just want to get your security questionnaire. So if something happens, you won't be considered negligent. Notification agreement. Establish establishment of agreements that procedures facilitate communication among supply chain entities. Early notification of compromise, potential compromise on the supply chain that could potentially adversely affect or have adversely affected organizational systems. Right. So for me, that's part of breach notification. And once again, you want to get that out to your supply chain and your vendors. I think this is my young homie. Let's see who's showing up today. If I can see, let's see. Who is that? Am I there? Up there is. Shout out to Before the Billions. What's going on? How you doing today?
Hey, BBO, can you hear me?
Yep, crystal clear, man.
Yeah, thank you for sending me the link, man.
Always, man. I enjoy the company, man. So y'all doing anything supply chain in y'all org? You know anything? I know you do more data engineering. That's kind of not your thing, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my whole company is a supply chain,
Oh,
agricultural supply chain company.
okay, okay. So I'm sure y'all doing a lot of this probably from your security department.
Yep. Yeah, I had to work with security all the time, really.
That's cool. That's a good sign. That's a good sign.
Hmm.
Make
Yeah,
sure you're
I
in
actually
there.
know
But
this. Actually know the CISO. You see him all the
okay,
time.
that's cool. That's a good thing. You want your and I see that more and more. You want security out, especially with the data engineers, development. You know, in the old days, you just be in a room. Then when they do something wrong, then they run out and yell at people. But hopefully, you want to get integrate them. I used to go to stand-up meetings to try to, get our requirements in the pipeline. So I think that's happening more and more.
Right. But yeah, their standards is a little bit different.
Oh yeah, yeah,
They,
yeah.
they don't have it as often as like because I'm on the DevOps team.
Hmm.
So like theirs, like ours is like every day, and then theirs is like probably once out the week.
Yeah, I used to work on one. We used to have one at 8 o'clock every morning. I hated that. I was like, yeah, I'm too old. Let me hit this slide real quick. Temper resistant and detection, anti-temper technologies, tools and techniques provides a level of protection for systems, system components, and service against many threats, including reverse engineering, modification, and substitution. So, in the slides coming up, we're gonna look at some of the AWS tamper resistant things they have built in to their system. Shout out to AWS. Here, let me drop the link on LinkedIn if anybody wants to come up. Is that it? Yep, yep. Oh, so how's the job treating you?
Oh man, I'm loving it. They just came out with an article that featured me, talking about the work that data engineers do.
I saw that. I gave you a like. I saw it on LinkedIn. Shout out to you.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. But yeah, that it's been just great. A great experience, great, a lot of opportunity.
That's cool. You coming up, man. You need those, man. I'm
Yeah,
just
man.
I'm trying to skate on into retirement, man. Yeah, let's hit this SR10 inspection of systems or components. Inspection of systems or system components for temper resistance and detecting address physical and logical tempering is applied to systems and system components removed from organizational control areas. So if somebody took a server out in an area, once again, could they tamper with it? Could they do something to it? But hopefully, compensating control. We got webcams, badged in areas, so you shouldn't be letting people walk out with servers and systems, right? So that's kind of a weird security family.
Yeah, they working out with whole hard drives.
Oh, in the old days, man, they used to walk out with whole blades. Then we had to lock it down. I think the cleanest company was stealing, but I'm old. That was like 2010, 2005. They had to shut that down with the webcams. Like what stuff was coming up missing. This is the one too. Component authenticity. Develop and implement anti-counterfeit policies and procedures that includes means to detect and prevent counterfeit components from entering the system. Report counterfeit system components to source of the counterfeit components, personnel or roles. So I think they're worrying about because motherboards and stuff was coming from China and they were just coming in already infected with malware. Let's see. Shout out to Jupiter. What's up,
Can
Jupiter?
you
How you? Yeah, I can. How you
can you
doing
hear me?
today?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I'm just coming in the tail end. So yeah, I was seeing your class of the supply risk management. I'm just gonna land my plane with this.
Okay.
Uh, a lot of breaches are. It's pretty much. It's not. It's going to be non-conducive to supply chain management because everything is going to have that firmware embedded to where you could do a breach or uh, some type of remote code execution, and that's something just is going to be a big proactive is your supply chain management because
Hmm.
as you deploy these systems or these network devices, workstations, it's going to be pinged to an origin to. made in China.
I know.
So it's like when I look at this part right here in this continuous monitor, the supply chain management, it's just like
Mhm.
I'm just like, it's
What?
like it's it's like trying to throw a pebble in the Mississippi River. It's just
Yeah,
it's trying to change
but
it,
but
but
you know the game though is at least they trying to acknowledge it so we can at least kind of try to do something. They didn't even acknowledge it for a decade, but go ahead. So I think they just try to acknowledge it at a high level. Go ahead
and
though.
I mean I understand it, but it's just like
Oh, I know.
it's just like.
I
And
know.
here's the part of this cyber realm, and then you know, and don't even get me started about AI because that's another issue.
Oh, facts,
But
facts.
it's just I don't know. It's just especially with the supply chain management because it's like whoever your vendor is, there's always going to be risk. So it's like
Oh yeah.
it's just like you're just picking two cards, who's the least risk, and who's
Right.
going to be. And at the same token, when you have what is that out of that RMF that CVEE whatever
Yeah.
that
Mm-hmm.
when that
Yeah.
comes out, it's like okay, well, so your best bet is just like here's the thing, and I would say this to any company. Make sure you're doing your security training and awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure you're doing your defense layer and your
Yep.
passwords,
Yep.
and that'll probably be your best safe bet
Oh, 100%.
because that's it. And that's all I'll lay my plane with that one. If anyone else can chime in.
No, that's it. The big thing in there, add a little MFA in there. Like you said, this these attacks are so novel. Like you said, you throwing a pebble. The cool thing is, if you're in the cloud, I think AWS, Azure, and Google, I think they're kind of they are handling it better than most companies. But now you still right. It's like a pebble in the ocean, right? So, and really, that's why I always said negligent. You don't want to be considered negligent. You did the check, you talked about it, you did the risk, but
It's
where
just pretty much you're
where's your
just doing a
firmware
doc.
where your
You're just
firmware coming from? But go
it's
ahead.
it's just at this point it's just your documentation, just the
Yep.
CYA on you,
Facts.
and
Facts.
for the company, and especially for any if they has a big data leak or breach, it's
Hmm.
just hey look, we have this paperwork and documentation.
Hmm.
Hey, legal. Hey, look, we had it,
Right.
and then the insurance. Hey,
Right.
this that's above my pay grade, but that's all I
Right.
say.
Now you're right. We make sure we can collect on our cyber insurance, right? So we got to do some basic hygiene for the cyber security. If anybody else, I dropped the link over there on LinkedIn. If anybody want to click it and come up from the LinkedIn side, let me read the next slide real quick. Uh, SR12 component disposal. Data documentation tools, system components can be disposed of anytime during the system development lifecycle. Most people know I do the IRS. If you get rid of a server that have IRS, even if it's at AWS or Google, they know if it's used for federal work, they got to drill holes in it and put out an attestation how that disk was actually destroyed. Now we know in the cloud they're splicing it up and giving it to different people, but when they destroy it, especially from AWS Gov or Azure.gov, they will have to drill holes in it and show the attestation of how that was actually disposed of. Anybody want to chime in on that? You want some of that B2B?
I'm not really too familiar with it. I mean,
Okay.
I guess it's more so your governance, like data
Yep.
governance.
Hmm.
Yeah. Like we have our of over a certain period of time we have to let go of some old data.
Hmm. Hmm.
But also it's for like memory issues as well, because I mean like these tables get large, man.
Oh yeah.
Like millions of rows and things get slow. So
Yeah.
sometimes you just have to like archive some data.
Yeah, they
But
was talking
yeah.
about sharding data and putting it in different locations and spreading it out over multiple disks and Oracle has this thing called partition data. So when you do a search, if it's time and know exactly where to look at, so you could cut your searches down by a factor of 1,000 or something crazy for that.
Well, I know in a defense company where I used to work at Raytheon, they used to just give it to somebody, the custodian, and he destroys it, and then
Mm-hmm.
and you make sure you have your documentation. Like either he just gets a third party to destroy it, like shred it, or
Yeah,
especially with CDs or any other stuff,
yeah.
or especially if it was a hard drive, you have to do a big memory Z wipe and then still go
No.
through another process of destroying it. Yeah, my thing is just put it in a big old bucket and just burn it all. So
No, pretty much like you said when you do those big DoD companies. Jason asked me, "Are you an auditor conducting these trainings for the company?" I audit. I don't do training. Most people we outsource the training. We get one of the big training companies that do training on site. But I do internal audits for the companies I work for. I do SSPs. I do security reviews. I do really security analyst work from that point of view, particularly from a federal point of view. Once again, you see it right there. I do NIST. That's my bailiwick, NIST 800-53. I've been doing that for like 15 years. So I think me and Juanita gonna talk about that. PBO's old. He been in the game for a long time. So I always tell anybody if they got a question for me, just reach out. So that's it. We kind of wrapping up. Supply chain is a small security family. Those are the sub families, and once again, most of those are going to be outsourced to your vendor, especially when everybody's going to the cloud. So I pulled these actually from AWS. Well, this is the first one. What's the difference between a supplier and a vendor? Right, we have to use those interchangeably, but they have distinct meaning. A supplier provides raw material, components, or goods to another business for production or resale. They typically operate at the beginning or the middle of the supply chain. Example: a steel manufacturer supply raw materials to an automobile company. A vendor sells finished goods directly to a business or consumer. They usually are the last link in the supply chain. A retailer selling electronics to a customer, or a company providing office supplies to a business, right? So I kind of was using those interchangeably, and I guess I need to stop that. So go ahead and chime in on that, B2B. You want some of that? I know this.
Yeah, yeah. It's like I guess like most people have to like take responsibility for the data that they provide as well. I
Mm-hmm,
mean,
mm-hmm,
like, cause like with certain teams, like my team right now, we take in a lot of data from other teams, and not all the time is it like clean.
mm-hmm,
So, especially like in supply chain, it's kind of like there's so many different frames of business that you interact with. It's like, okay, well, I'm getting data from, you know, so many different like lines of business. It could be like food, it could be fuel, it could be finance data, and everything needs to be treated differently.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, um, like when you say like I would guess I would be more so the uh one of the vendors, I guess,
Yeah, I
in that
think he would.
case.
Yep, he would be. He would be.
Yeah.
and, from what I was hearing, a lot of times the vendors, like say if there's a vulnerability on one of their soft, like say what is it, Jenkins, like that
Mm-hmm.
application or software. I don't know if you're familiar with it. They
I
may
am.
have a may have a vulnerability that they haven't patched or did something, and
Mm-hmm.
they'll let you know, be like, hey, yo, look, hey, we got a vulnerability, but
Mm-hmm.
hey, here's this piece of paper. Like, look, you accept this risk, we'll still supply it to you, but on our end, I'm like.
Yeah.
So it's like on both parties on two loose ends. Like, hey, look, hey, pay to play, but you accept the risk. But
Mm-hmm.
and that's God. Yes, I'm just looking at the supply thing. I'm just laughing because it's like you just I had that flashback. You sit in those meetings, you like Jesus Christ. Yeah,
Yeah, like you said, it's down there. The cool thing, like with Jenkins and those bigger companies, usually when they find a vulnerability, they fix it, right? Because they're trying to get that federal
usually,
money. Yeah, and usually they try to let you know before they let the public know, right? And usually, a lot of times, if they find something, they tell you, well, if you set these mitigating controls up, that'll really cut down your risk, right? That's why I like to use reputable, larger companies, even if they're open source. Do they have a big footprint where a lot of companies are using them and helping them support it, right? And so, and what does that look like? Like you said, in the supply chain or in the vendor point. Jenkins probably would be in the vendor point. I thought Oracle was helping Jenkins actually because they were using it a lot. I think Oracle was helping them.
I don't know too much on that on the back end, but I do know. Well, like I said, just to piggyback, a lot of times they will try to fix that patch or that vulnerability as quickly as possible.
Oh, facts, facts. Because if they
Yeah,
get
they have
somebody hacked,
responsibility.
I'm gonna sue them. Now go ahead, B2B. If they don't, I'm gonna sue
Yeah, I was
them.
gonna say they have responsibility.
Yeah,
Yeah, like that's why you don't go for the packages from the two guys in the garage. You got to go with
facts.
like a big reputable company because they have something to lose.
Yep, and they have resources too. That's a big deal. They have resources, and hopefully they making money, so they don't want to get hacked, so they can support you. Hopefully they have a big test area. They have a lot of cybersecurity people testing their software out. The bigger they are, and there's the key differences right there. Suppliers provides the raw material, vendor sells finished goods, suppliers upstream, vendors downstream. That shows you the customer type. So I thought that was a kind of interesting from that standpoint. Like I said, I was using those interchangeably. Here's how AWS was handling that. So we just skim over there. So for their supply chain, they have strict supply chain security protocols for their chip network devices storage are sourced from verified and trusted vendors, right? So AWS, the big guys are going to do that. AWS, Azure, and Google, right? They're trying to figure out their supply chain because they have a ton of federal work. So they're trying to make sure no Chinese things in there, like he said, be pinging your firmware, be pinging back to China.
Mm.
So those big guys follows those components from trusted vendors. Which what does that actually mean? All right. So
Yeah, yeah, but
go ahead. You
but
want some of that? Go ahead.
yeah, but no, I'm not even going to go into the whole Chinese part, like whoever. But my thing is, now that we have, I'm not trying to bring politics into it, but it's kind of good that the Doge is going in it because there's been a lot of. Well, I'm a former Army vet, but whenever time I hear like military grade, or it's always that lowest bidder.
Yeah. Facts.
So
Yeah.
I want to see where the rabbit hole goes with all this stuff, and I mean I don't know. It's just that's one thing. And I want to ask your question: With this
Hmm.
Doge going on, how's this going to look into the government sector, the cyber up? Because this is going to they about to get into the week. They how about this? They about to get in that behind. What's your opinion?
I think so. I think they're gonna get it from a budget standpoint. I don't know if they're gonna get to it with the intelligence community, even though the intelligence community doesn't like those guys. So I don't know. I might be backtracking on that a little bit. I I just I don't think they're gonna dig that deep in intelligence. Now I think they're gonna cut their budget because they got the biggest budget and they don't like the intelligence community. Um, but like I said, I'm guessing on that.
Yeah, I don't know, but like I don't know too much about AWS the cloud. I mean, I do know it's third party, like that party that's their baby right there. They're responsible for that. That's it.
Yeah.
But I do know there's a lot of risk involved because you have multiple servers that is
Mhm.
scattered out through the country. Any
Mhm.
breach, physical or network,
Uh, but yeah, you
So,
could, but you could pick your region. They actually have a government data center where only government agencies can run in their AWS Gov Center. They're spread out, but and then there you have to because I used to actually work for the DoD myself, so you actually have to get invited to work in the AWS Gov because there's only government agencies in there. So everybody in there is following some kind of security requirements and security controls. So you're not next to PBO's barbecue shack. So
Yeah, I saw a video of people using DeepSeek, and then they actually tracked the data that was being sent to China
mhm.
and Alibaba. Was that what you were referring to?
Yep, I've seen that
Okay.
before. I wasn't specifically referring to that, but AWS Gov, like you said, they have that. So you don't have those things because I don't think they're gonna let DeepSeek run in AWS Gov. Um,
Oh yeah. And I just found out about something. It's not new, but I should have known about it. It's called Olama, where you can
yeah,
run your LLMs in a container.
I still don't trust it. Yep, 100%.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. I know the model itself doesn't actually send data because it's not a part of an application, but
I,
because you
I,
can run it locally.
I still think they got backdoors in there trying to figure out. Because if you misconfigure it, it's gonna call China. But go home. Go ahead. Go ahead. Now
Right.
you got a chance to put it in your own Docker or Kubernetes and lock it down. But if you don't configure right, your shit gonna go back to China. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah,
It
that's
always
one
go back
thing.
to China.
So,
It's always going back.
but like you said, you can configure it, lock it down, But once again, you're responsible for that, and a lot of people aren't security experts to make sure your network's right. Where's your internet gateway is, your default gateway, how's it running? You said something wrong, man. It should be pinging China. Let me read the rest of this slide real quick on time. Hardware root of trust. AWS use cryptographic signatures and attestations to verify the integrity of their hardware. Tamper-proof hardware. They have their own Nitro systems for their EC2s, which runs Windows or Linux. Ensure their hardware is resistant to modifications or tampering. Components provenance. We saw that in the security family. The origins is and how they're getting it together. AWS track components from sourcing to deployment using secure logistics and anti-counterfeiting measures. Chime in on that B2B if you want to.
Um, I think you kind of hit on it. I'm not really too familiar with it.
No, me either. To be honest, that's high level, man. That's why I pay AWS to have that. Go ahead, Jupiter. You want any of that?
No, like I said, I'm
Yeah.
not. Like I said, I'm not too familiar with AWS. I mean, I do know it's the cloud, and that's their baby niche right
Mhm.
there. But just a caveat with the what is it? As far as your system admin and your IT personnel, like if they don't have a certain criteria or SOP, yeah, that could be the biggest threat right there that they
No.
misconfigured it,
Oh
and
yeah.
that's another problem.
And you'd be toast. Let's see what this. I think this is chiming on Jupiter. Doge's most recent activities has caused me to reassess how I advise clients regarding the safety of their sensitive data in United States-based data centers.
That's a good statement right there because it's
That
like that's a pretty good statement.
Yeah, since we let the kids run amok at Treasury, was it Treasury? Yeah,
Yeah, Treasury a
yeah,
few weeks ago. Yeah,
yeah. Now that's ew, I didn't even think about that. And once they get cleared, I always tell people they got cleared. Now we can talk if they should have been cleared. You can they can get in it if it's in AWS, if it's in Azure, if it's in Google. Once they get cleared, they got access to anything they want to go into, right?
well,
But
no, because if they got, now I don't know if any of you guys have a clearance. I have a
I've got
clearance.
clearance. I have.
I
Well,
have a,
I
cl-
used
I
to
have
have
a,
clearance. Go
I
ahead.
still have my clearance, but if they get to the clearance part, like you pretty much home free. If you had from your confidential, your secret, and your TSCI, like oh yeah, you're home free. Like
Those
you can
guys
go
were
in and
cleared.
be
Those guys were cleared. Now I don't know what level they was cleared at. Those young guys were cleared. Now we can talk about if they should have been cleared. Those guys were cleared to do that work.
yeah, but they'll give them the need to know and access granted just to
Oh,
do
now
their job.
yeah, that's what I said. I said least privileges and need to know. Now we can discuss that, but those guys got cleared. Old school
They got
science.
cleared.
So yeah, so the other part of AWS, let me read this. Cryptographical verification of the firmware. We were talking about firmware and security control, digital signatures. AWS signs firmware, software, and updates to ensure only verified code is executed. Secure boot and TPM, trusted platform modules. Hardware supports secure boot, which prevents unauthorized firmwares from running on AWS servers. And their Nitro security chip, I'm going to start delving into Nitro a little bit, uses the system to cryptographically verify integrity of the instance, hypervisor, ensuring only authorized code is injected into their system. So we talked about their firmware and how they were doing it, right? And that's one reason I'm kind of more sold on the cloud because I'm like, if we got to do this on prem, we definitely ain't gonna get this shit right. But let me see what Adele said. Conflict of interest, probably. They have active federal government contracts, 100%. Once again, continuous monitoring. AWS System Manager provides inventory tracking, patch compliance, and secure access logging. AWS Guard Duty Inspector monitors and detects anomaly in hardware software behavior that might indicate authenticity concerns. AWS Artifact and Compliance Reports provide compliance documentation, SOC 2, Type 2, ISO, FedRAMP, HIPAA High Trust to assure their hardware authenticity and security practice. So once again, that's how the big vendors, and once again, Azure is doing this and Google's doing it. They all have federal work, so they all had that requirement from the security, from the supply chain security families we were looking at, right? So how do you check the box to make sure you were doing that? Once again, customer control keys, encryption keys allow customers to enforce their own authenticity checks, enable customers to sign and verify authenticity of data and workloads. So a lot of times when developers log in, we have them sign their code and checking in. So if somebody else tries to impersonate them from a different system, it doesn't have their keys, we know that person shouldn't be able to check their code in because once again, they couldn't sign it with the proper key. Right. Once again, certificate management, they get their TLS certificate to validate entities and encrypted communication by complying supply chain security, cryptographic verification, continuous monitoring. AWS ensures authenticity and integrity of components it uses in its cloud infrastructure, right? Shout out to AWS making it happen. I think that's all I had for today. Let's see, Chris Whitlock hating on AWS until they upload the key to GitHub. Facts. Now, shout out to them. I did a video on if you actually update your access keys, like we were talking about. I did a run book on them, so we'll probably talk about that again. Anybody want to chime in? You want to chime in on that before the billions?
I mean, as long as you, I would say this, as long as your keys are like, you have what I get. It's been a minute since I messed with the whole private keys and encryption keys,
No,
but
no.
as long as you have that one key maker or whoever it is, you have this key, but you do like it's just like you change your password, you change the keys at
Mhm.
least every 2 weeks or every month, or whoever how your compliance and your companies has, so that way that key doesn't get fell into the wrong hands. So you always want to change that key here and there.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah, for our user key, developer keys, I think we change those every 60 days. System keys, because nobody should be touching them. We try to change those a year. But if you're using GSMs and TSMs inside Windows, they change them every day, right?
yeah, that's
Behind
that
the scene.
BitLocker key. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, they change them every day. So shout out to BitLocker. I'm trying to get better with my Windows stuff. So I just tell people if they're using service accounts, they got to use those GSM accounts. Of course, once again, BitLocker manages those keys behind the scene. Let's see. Okay, Adele is hitting them up. Let's see. Conflict of interest. I think we're talking about those. They have active security contracts, 100%. There's authorized wire Doge AI government contracts open if there have been authorized wire Doge AI uh, AI friend office. That's a good question. Friend, so everyone is there. VP Van. Yeah, I don't know. I need to dig into that. PBO trying to get his own stuff together. I don't know. You want to
Yeah,
chime in on that?
yeah, I was hearing something about VPNs now. Now they're in a bit. They've been getting a little bit in a vulnerability too now. So I don't
I
know if
saw
this is
that.
true. I don't know word on the street is that true right now.
No, that's true. That's true. I think that's how China was getting us. Some of those VPNs aren't as secure as they was talking about. Because some of the top security companies they had vulnerabilities in VPNs and they didn't tell anybody. Because when they needed to get in, they would get in to foreign companies. So because when they got hacked, they actually had to release their tools. So Let's
I think
see.
it's like how you always say, PBO. A company is always hacked. They just don't know it yet.
Yeah, it's coming. I appreciate you, Juanita. We definitely link up Friday. Shout out to Game Over. Thanks for joining. Once
Yeah,
again, it,
and just to piggyback off of what the young man was saying, it's just like, well, I already said my piece with the supply chain. Your best bet is to have multi-factor
mm-hmm,
defense layered, and make
mm-hmm.
sure you have security awareness in your passwords and separate of duties.
Yeah, yeah.
That's will be your best bet on the basics on that part right there. If you can just keep those basics right there, you'll be fine for a company. And then with the
No,
encryption of your data, like data at rest stays encrypted, data in transit stays encrypted, and the need to know between and then separated.
yeah, that's no. You're correct. Like you said, I always tell people if we can do the basic and get 80%, we'd be killing the game. So Adele said must offer to buy AI for 949 billion. Sam Altman is not selling. He's friends too. Yeah, he's actually about to break away from Microsoft. So that's the interesting part. What's up, Jim R? Thanks for joining.
Yeah, for OpenAI to move away from Microsoft is gonna be a tall ask.
Now
I mean,
Doge
they're a
is
heavy investor.
oh facts, facts. Now Game Over Doge is a quasi government agency. I think once the Democrats get back in, they're gonna blow that up. So I think that's just a temporary agency. So it's interesting though. Kind of going through and kind of going through the budget, talking about waste. Once again, we know the Republicans, and I'm not in political game. They're for smaller government. Everybody knows that, so they're definitely gonna their take on that, and Doge is gonna make that happen. If you looked at Project 2025 at all, they told you in there what large government agencies they were going to downsize or get rid of. So, um, me too, as I tell people from a cybersecurity perspective and a tech question, and I need to reach out to Black Heights. I think it's a good thing. They're just going to push all that work to the big consulting companies. They think third parties and vendors can do it better than internal people. So I think the contracted companies are going to blow up and get that work and get that money because that work has to be done. So that's kind of my take on it. You got any take on that before the billions that you chime in on?
Oh yeah, I completely agree with the last part. I think it's just gonna be more vendors that's gonna be filling in those gaps.
Yeah, so I think that's gonna push it. I think um, in the feds it's kind of scary because a lot of times you sometimes they're not up to date on the latest thing. So I think so that might I guess hurt some people that's in the federal space. Once again, I think all that work is gonna go to. They're also Doge coins. Oh, facts. Consider me. That's true for the Doge. We was just talking about from a quasi government perspective. But no,
No,
that's kind of my take on it. What's your take on that, Jupiter?
no, I'm just put it like this. I'm not trying to bring politics in it, but we can't act like this wasn't a long time coming with the federal government. Let's act like this wasn't a long time. Even when I was deployed like years ago overseas, I saw weeks ago. So let's act like this wasn't the hell to happen.
Right. But I always tell people, I always think the pendulum swings. Like we cut it too, I think, too deep around Reagan years. Then we built it back up. And I think we went too far, right? Like you said. So I think we got to bring it on back a little bit. Commissioner was on Bloomberg for the coins. Okay, okay. But no, I agree with you. So I think we just trying to find that I ain't gonna say happy medium, medium, but like you said, so I just think it's time. Like you said, they're shrinking it down, and so it's gonna be interesting. So
I would say with like with the sort of supply thing, I think we need to start making some of our tech. Well, I don't know. Like I said, I don't follow the bandwidth on it. Some of our tech systems and our chips here, or kind of have variety and stuff like that. But that way, it kind of lowers your risk in the firmware. It would,
Mhm.
or, you know, network systems or workstations, and any breaches.
No, I agree with that. I think they're building one in Texas, was the rumor.
Yeah, I've heard.
Let's see what Larry said. I already internal rumors of Elon backed companies getting bigger piece of the contract pie. Yep, we know that was gonna happen, man. You get, you spend 200 million, you're gonna get some, right? She's about free maximum ideology. This is fresh out the pub papers. They're cutting programs that account for 1% of Fed spending. Now, you're correct with that. It looks good in the headline. Last that, but you are correct, Larry. So I think how you position yourself in the next 4 years, like I said, I think that work's going to go to consulting companies, especially that federal work. It'd be interesting once again if they cut that federal money. Are they going to give it to the states, or are they just going to outsource it directly to? Because 3 years ago they put out a $9 billion cloud RFP request for a proposal. So Oracle was bidding on it. Google, the big four, Google, Azure, Amazon, and Oracle. I was surprised Oracle got a piece. They put out a $9 billion RFP for cloud services. So I think that type of work is going to continue to expand.
Well, I would say now, well, after how put it like this, after the crying has stopped, or the cutting has stopped, or the beating has stopped, and everything subsided, I would think everything will go to consulting third party with the government here and there, like maybe some of your continuous monitoring or your processes of your compliances. It's some of it will probably have more of a third party stake in the whole of other companies or vendors, and that's what I would probably think what would happen. But I don't
Yeah.
know. Who's to
No,
say? I don't know.
no, I agree with that. Like I said, I think it's going to go to the third party and the consulting companies. They're just going to eat all that up. So that's going to be. Um, I appreciate you for joining, Jason. Let's see what Todd said. If they're worried about spending, why don't they go after military
Oh,
wasteful
that's
spending?
they going after that. I do know that that's one thing that needs to be going after.
Yeah, I think they're gonna get to it. I think they're tiptoeing it around because the veterans are a big voting block. So, but I like you said, I think they're gonna get to it. Cloud in America, overseas, clouds in America. Well, once again, Amazon, those guys got data centers around the world, but you can pick because if you're doing federal work, it's got to be on. They used to call it CONUS, Continental United States. They called it. So I got to get the new terminology, but no, all United States data's got to stay in the United States or United States province. I know they need the military for the Gaza resort. I ain't touching that one. I ain't touching the Gaza resort. But I am tired. I'm struggling. You want to chime with anything before the billions?
Yeah, man, I think this is an important part because it really just shows like the when you talk about like supply chain, it really shows how important it is just to be able to get some of that data
Hmm.
to like the vendor securely, and it really does like highlight the importance of, okay, well, we need to make sure that these companies have done their risk assessments, even
Yeah.
the ones that they have dependencies for. Because I mean, people rely on the real world, like the data is one thing, but the real world impacts that it has is so important because, like, let's say the company doesn't provide the data, then that means food won't be shipped to like a certain grocery store, and then
Hmm.
people's lives are affected by that, or the data isn't shipped and the planes won't fly or something like that, or somebody, the planes might crash or something like that because there may be some issues with the data.
Yeah, because what vendor? They were a security vendor, man. They shut down the airport. What vendor was that?
Is it CrowdStrike that you're
It was
talking about?
CrowdStrike. Yeah,
It was
they.
the
I was like,
CrowdStrike, yeah,
they.
that shut down everything. They had a rip.
Yeah, yeah. I was surprised. I'm like, I'm in Indiana. It's like they shut down Indianapolis airport. I'm like, so that one surprised me.
Yeah, man. I mean, imagine that kind of stuff. Like that's the real world effects, and people don't understand, like how important software engineers and data
Hmm.
engineers and database developers are. I mean, that's kind of the stuff, or people who work on the network. All of
Yeah,
those jobs are important.
yeah. You remember that thing we created, that Stuxnet thing? That affected everything, like literally.
Yeah.
So imagine with that crowd, the crowd strike. Because my sister, she was in IT, like her company, they were running around with their heads cut off because they had to literally go to each workstation to do that remedy. And I think I touched a little bit on it when I had to do a job. Like I think you had to go in there, uh, hit F7, F6 or something, and go through the
Yeah.
whole. I'm like, oh wow,
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah,
That was
man. I
that
mean,
was
like
crazy.
hospitals were down and everything. It was crazy. But they
Yeah.
yeah,
have
you had
like they have fault tolerant, mission
yeah.
critical software on their computers just in case. But even still, like universities, all kinds of different industries were affected by CrowdStrike.
Yeah, because it was that code you had to go in there. I think you had to go to the command prompt, and then you had to open it up and then delete something off the thing. Yeah. Oh God.
Hold on, Jupiter, real quick. Shout out to Chris Whitlock. Chime on in there. He's supposed to be in bed, man. What's going on? I think he's talking to his wife though. I think he. Can you hear me, Chris? Uh oh. I think he's setting up his setup. Go ahead, Jupiter. We're gonna let Chris chime in once he get his setup right.
No, that was it. I was just laying my plane with that one right there.
Well, let me see what Adeli said. He said tariff for vendors, are the costs going up? Yeah, I think the cost is gonna go up. I would say marginally because a lot of that cost is already built in. It's going to be interesting to see if we. Well, I take that back. I thought they were going to get the H-1B visas, but it sounded like Trump and Elon was for the H-1Bs. So that was interesting. I'll put that out. Interesting. Hold on, guys. Let me let Chris chime in. Chime in there, Chris. You ready?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I couldn't hear you at first, and I knew that was a mistake because I could see you talking.
Okay, I
But I
talk a
can hear
lot.
you now.
That's
There
cool.
was actually a separate question that I was asking, so I came in a little bit later. But
Go ahead.
in
Go ahead.
regards to the supply chain, especially the 53, I was curious about your expertise on that. Like, what are some of the most common areas that businesses fail in? Is that like properly keeping track of the vendors, or like what
The,
areas should we look at the most?
most, unless you're a large mature company, most people don't do risk assessment on vendors. They just take their word for it. So I think that's the big one. So now if you look at the federal space and the state space, especially since cassettes and all the big hacks, they're really pushing that. R5, the risk assessment, supply chain, and the PI part just exploded on a number of checks because they're trying to at least get a handle on it at a high level. And we were talking about that. Um, how do you follow your components of your servers? That's one thing I say is I was anti-cloud about 5 years ago, but we read some of the AWS checks and Azure is doing the same thing. They're at the maturity level to do that. If you run your own data center, you're gonna struggle to do that type of stuff.
Very true. Well, and so it also seems like sometimes a lot of these companies think that a questionnaire is a audit. That's something else I've heard of at
Oh yeah.
least.
Oh yeah,
So
and I've sent out big questionnaires with 100 questions, and I told you this bigger companies because they doing all this, they tell you to pound sand. Like if we fill out your questionnaire, we're gonna charge you because they got to take resources to do it, which makes sense, right? But two, if
oh
you got
yeah,
a SOC 2 type 2 a FedRAMP audit you went to or one of the bigger audits, I'll take that documentation all day for that. But yeah, I was surprised. AWS, I don't think they're going to look at any of your security exhibits, security questionnaires unless you're spending 5 million and above.
checks
I haven't.
out.
So which makes sense for them.
Straight cash, homie.
Straight cash. So let's see. B2B, you want to chime in on any of that?
Yeah, man, it's big business, man. I heard that in some case, I remember you saying something about this, is that some of the documentation can be so overwhelming for small companies,
Oh, it
they
is.
won't even be able to finish it.
Oh, facts. And most of them just tell you. I've just had little companies just say We're just not mature enough to do it," right? So, or two, they lied and say they have no findings. If we ever had a company that says we have no findings, we're like, dude, we're not. There's no way you can have no findings. That cannot be possible. So,
Yeah, it's extensive, right?
yeah. So yeah. So but yeah. But I think that's and I and I had a guy, and I'm gonna interview him. Irish guy, loved him, taught me security. We had about 20 vendors that did tax, and he walked into this tax. I'll never forget conference. He told them to their face, "I only need 4 of y'all to do my work," because he just said, "I don't want 20 because that's more of a security risk of stuff we have to check." And I never thought of it about like that. I was like, damn, he just told me, he's like, "I only need about 4 of y'all." So I needed, in his mind, we needed the 3 big guys and we need a couple little guys. We don't really need 20 vendors. I just never thought about that. I mean, from a procurement perspective, the more vendors you have, you can play them against each other, try to get a lower price. But he said, from a security perspective, he said, "I'll pay a little more money and more than try to get because the government goes low man wins." He said a lot of times low man wins have shitty security. So I thought that was interesting. Let's see. You want any of that, Jupiter?
No, a lot of, like I said, a lot of all that stuff. It has a lot of overhead fee, and a lot of that overhead fee.
Yeah.
Especially the guy, the baseball cap, I don't know his name. Like, yeah, that's a lot of money right there, especially when you're doing assessment right there. That's a lot of time. And yeah, you're always going to find it. Anybody who says, look, we have no findings, okay, give me that thing again. Let me, I'll bet you
No.
I'll find something.
No. We saw that one time when we were looking at each other. We like, and what my boss did, he did something was I thought was brilliant is we never denied anybody. We just would never clear them.
Um,
So we gonna let you take yourself out to run it. So I was like, so we just keep sending your stuff back. Let me read this security expert. I think this reply. They take their word, and then at some point, everyone realized the vendor fails the foreign ownership and foreign control security requirement. And me and Chris talked about that one time. He has a French company, like, no, I'm just joking, but what does that look like in real life? And from a federal perspective, and everybody know I'm a Fed guy, we got to look at your foreign ownership and foreign control. And you at least need a satellite office somewhere in the United States to do federal work, right? Now, a lot of big companies now are global companies, but still, we need you to. What's your foreign ownership, foreign control, and in that one slide, what was influence? What influence from other foreign entities like money or things they're doing? So that's one of the things from a cybersecurity perspective you need to start digging into. Hold on, let me see this other reply from security expert in the chat. And the products and services under control of adversary country, like we just said. So that's it. You want anything on that, Chris? You want to chime in on anything on that?
no, I think that's yeah, no, not really. The foreign ownership portion. I mean, the only thing I'd add is, I mean, this DeepSeek app is pretty awesome. I mean, it's pretty cheap compared to ChatGPT.
You think they stole it? ChatGPT said they stole the testing from them, man. That's what they saying, man. He said they
Yeah.
did for 6 million because they took all our stuff.
I
Shout out
think they
to
did
yeah,
personally.
IP. Yeah, I'm not counting out any countries, but they be stealing IP, man. They be stealing
Well,
IP.
Chat GPT stole stuff too, so it's kind of like, you know,
Facts.
That's
Hey,
stolen
what
look,
makes it
stolen
interesting.
stuff.
hey, look,
Yeah.
I'm using GPT right now to write my resume down. I was like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, facts.
I
Facts.
was like, oh, what sorcery is this? I was like, where have I been? I've
Oh
just
yeah.
now touched it. So I was like,
No,
oh, this is
no,
easy.
no. You right. I
Yep.
was doing some stuff in there. Let's see what my man Ty said. Hopefully, the supply chain will improve. with the reshaping, we're left vulnerable to attacks. No, that's true. Like I said, I think we're we're getting better at it. I think once again, shout out to the cloud vendors, and I show some of the AWS checks for that. So I think they're definitely all over because they want some of that $9 billion RRP cloud service provider money. So I think once again too is they got an army of people at those cloud vendors. I know AWS had 2,000 security professionals. It was some crazy number like that. So. Um, Now we can talk about are they doing it correctly? Are they doing it? But once again, they got paperwork, so they ahead of most people. I couldn't even imagine if I was running my own data center, what would that look like? I don't even know how to look at it from a risk assessment standpoint. I was just we got some firmware. We validating it. Really, what I do, I cheat everything AWS had. I will send to our data center. Are we doing this? So they're doing this. Are we doing anything close to this? The answer probably would be no. But yep, shout out to that. I haven't looked at DeepSeek once again since I do federal work, loading Chinese software on my phone or my workstation. I don't know if I could professionally do that. That's
That's
stabbing me in my soul. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's one way to get a immediate meeting with your manager. What's going on, PVO?
Facts.
They would not allow it.
Yeah, so I don't even look at that. And shout out to I think it was Rhonda R Square. ChatGPT has a government one they're putting out that's in government data centers that's locked into that. So I'm gonna do a video on using ChatGPT, the FedRAMP version. They don't have FedRAMP. They're in the process of getting it. So I thought that was interesting.
And I'm not a massive fan of Copilot personally. However, I did find it really interesting to find out that they're doing the same thing with Copilot as well, to make sure that it's inside of like FedRAMP compliant systems and so forth for Copilot. There was a talk at Wild West this last week that was really interesting around AI risk. And they primarily focused on Copilot, but with these different models that you put out, like one of the interesting things that I found was they're like prompt for it. Like, so one of the examples they provided is one of their employees was like, oh, you know, what's going on with this department? And then the Copilot had access to a SharePoint of, you know, an entire plan a year prior to shut that entire department down, as an example. So you want to test those different types of prompts and stuff out too.
Oh yeah. That's so.
Yeah, I do also want to bring this up too. Is that I remember they were talking about using AI and using it for your job, and you know, in actuality, it's kind of really difficult to use LLMs for your job to like do things that are proprietary. You know, like you can't look up certain things because hey, this is specific to this organization. But when you have, I think was it RAG, retrieval augmented generation,
Yeah.
you can like load it with data so that way you can, you know, do things for your job or like something specific.
Yeah, I always ask. We have a AI committee, or you can ask your boss, and so just doing stuff like generating basic NIST templates, basic IRS templates, basic. I try to do a supply chain risk management plan template because I never saw one before. What does look like in ChatGPT? So doing those plans, then overlaying them, customize them specifically for your company, right? So I'm not putting any company data. I'm actually using those to kind of generate a template. Usually they're kind of for large companies. So if you're doing smaller companies, kind of chopping them down to kind of meet that kind of requirement and what that will look like. So that's kind of how I'm doing it. So I'm gonna give my man Chris Whitlock gonna do some labs and generate out some policies and some plans and kind of overlay those, kind of like you would do if you were at your job, like you said, B2B, and what would that look like if you were doing it internal assessment and you need those plans to turn over to your auditor. So,
and one of the things I want to drop here too is that so There's a AI Security 101 from OWASP Atlas to learn a little bit about like the security of AI. And then also NVIDIA now has AI like fundamental courses for free as well. I think that's, everybody needs to start reading up and learning about AI and how it actually works.
Now, facts. I did the NIST AI 100 video, so that kind of got me up, and I did it. Me and Dwight kind of did the privacy video, and that was actually kind of off the AI infrastructure. How do you handle privacy with AI and what that looks like? Once again, AWS gives you a bunch of services, so they were talking about which services and how you would use them. How to just the
Doesn't
top level.
AWS have their own AI too?
Yeah, it's called Sage. Yep.
Sage, that's right.
Yeah. So I'm actually gonna I actually might get their certification. They have a couple low level certifications.
We need to do the thin clients.
I might actually buy one. I'm enamored with the thin client. I worked for a company that used thin clients from AWS. It's just so much cheaper than two. It's only $150. So if you never get it back, it's not a big deal. Right. Then
Yeah, it's
from a
not like you send them a MacBook.
yeah, and the cool thing is they're super easy to lock down. So you can't really do anything but go to your workspace and work. Right? There's nothing on the thing. So I thought that was super interesting. Especially if you were starting to start up a small company. Um, I'm sure if the development staff and your DBAs need something bigger, but if you were doing some kind of client service or something small, I think that's the way to go from a security perspective and a cost perspective. So, um, my Todd said he heard Checkpoint and Wiz was joining forces to check Palo Alto. Yeah, but once again, this supply risk is a kind of novel family. Unless you're actually doing that type of hardware at that level. Once again, I'm leaving that to the big four or five, Rackspace, Salesforce, which sits on top of AWS. I kind of let them handle it. But you, as a GRC professional, need to inherit these controls from your cloud vendor to check the box, right? So you got to make sure because you're still responsible for it. So you need to make sure your cloud vendors are doing it. I would pull down. We put it in there. It's called AWS Artifacts. They actually have documentation, SOC 2s, Type 2s, telling you what they're doing. So I would just add that documentation to yours. So if anything happens, you won't be considered negligent from a GRC perspective, aka privacy perspective, either. You want anything on that one, Chris?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. Yeah, I mean, my primary question was just the most common ones from the supply chain family. I mean, did they even have the supply chain before what 2014?
No,
or or
I don't think they had that in there. No, I don't think supply chain was in there. So yeah, I think that along with risk assessment, because of the last big hacks of the last 5 years, there's been some major third-party hacks and supply chain hacks. So once again, I think they're trying to dig into it right to the next level. So it kind of makes sense. So they just keep adding to it. But unless you're a mature organization, that's just that's a heavy lift.
Yeah, I mean, from both sides. And then also, like, something else that I've also heard of is like, especially if it's a larger company that's onboarding a smaller vendor, if they fail to meet, XYZ, then they may even assist them with that. I'm sure that's a lot more,
Hmm.
based on the org and so forth. But if you guys have to do business, then because that benefits the small company, a small company that has never gone through a risk assessment, and then you have to go through and do that to onboard them for your company. Then they're like, oh, wow, okay, so this is what we need to do.
Yeah, but I've seen it both ways. Sometimes a small company just don't have the bandwidth to handle that. And a lot of times they're confused. I sent the small vendor STIG checks. I thought they were gonna cry, man. It was so a lot of times too is that's why the big companies eat off each other because they're like, we do this, we do that, our paperwork's good. We know what we're gonna charge you a lot, but we're gonna make it easy for you. So that's why a lot of times you just don't see small vendors in there, man.
PBO shutting down those small businesses.
So yeah, I actually had this one lady. I'll never forget me and my boss, and I'm gonna interview him on Big Jam Bond. He ate this small vendor up so much. This lady screamed at him and said, "I'll never forget this. You taking food out of our mouths," because he was gonna kill their contract.
Yeah.
I was like, "Damn, that's a deep statement." I was like, "Dude, we just doing computer work." But that whole company was on it. We like, nah, y'all not ready for this IRS NIST type work. So um I think it's getting easier though, because the cloud's giving you a lot of bases to work for, and you can buy stuff off the marketplace for your EC2s or that's already hardened and ready to do that type of work, right? So they just have to build it in and bill the vendor or the state for those particular things they buy off a marketplace. So um, but yeah, it's just a heavy lift. I used to go, and we're gonna talk about this later. Is going Upwork, and you will see little companies out there trying to find federal people to help them bid on federal work, or they got some app and they sold it to the state. Now they're asking for all this documentation, and they have no idea how to start it.
Yeah, and honestly, like with the cloud, like I'm curious what other people think, but I can see probably in the next 10 to 15 years, the cloud is going to be the primary means of business. That's where a lot of businesses are already going. We have a lot in there already, but
It is unless you're a big company.
Well,
Unless you were Meta or somebody, Facebook, you, I mean, you can't
unless you have
afford
your
to.
own cloud,
Yep. I mean, they're so big they gonna fire up a nuclear power plant. So that's how big they are. They gonna
literally.
Yeah, they're gonna restart 3 Mile Island. So I mean, because originally before DeepSeek, right, AI was using that much power. So I thought that was interesting. They're starting up nuclear power plants to do that type of AI work because it's not enough electricity. Our grid is not strong enough to do that level of
Mhm.
calculation at that volume, which that's hard for me to believe though, for some reason.
Now, PBO, did you see that the CEO of Sam Altman, the Open AI CEO,
Mhm.
was talking about how they're actually losing money on their paid subscription for using ChatGPT 4.0?
No, I thought so, but
Yeah, it's like they aren't charging enough money.
no,
But
but that's the
mm,
game though. That you grow it, then at a certain level, it was free. Now it's 20. Once they get more, then the bigger company's gonna need it because everybody's using it. They're gonna start charging them a crazy amount of money, man. So that
Yeah,
yeah,
they almost to that level. That's how it rolls. People forgot Facebook didn't make money for a decade. They were burning money. They were spending their VCs. Their venture capital was keeping them afloat. They didn't make money for a decade.
that's a really good mention
yeah.
because also like OpenAI probably has the largest amount of integrations with different services already.
Yep, they that's the blueprint. That's the that's the Microsoft blueprint too. And Microsoft, that what did Microsoft give them? Microsoft gave them some crazy amount of money. So I mean, they can burn that up for probably a decade with Microsoft. Then they let them use their hardware. I wouldn't say for free, but right, that's part of them paying them was to give them that hardware. Then Microsoft, well, hell, we gotta spin up 3 Mile Island, get some more power. So let's
Yeah,
see.
yeah,
man.
Let's see what secret expert says. At the top secret level, supply chain assessments have been mandatory as well as at the secret level for most part. I'm glad that the family has been formally added to the NIST catalog. I agree with you. I just don't think we were doing it well when I was at DOD, but you are correct. We've been doing it for you. I just didn't think we were doing it well. But once again, I wasn't in a data center like that. So um, first one's free business model. Facts. Sierra. This will get their bag if they can keep treading water. Oh, they're not treading water. Microsoft's backing them. Microsoft's got infinite money.
yeah. As
They
long as as long as their pockets are deep, hey, they got just like any other risk. I'd be like, hey,
they
we,
got they
like,
got, they
we
got
can we can
Microsoft money. They're using Microsoft's money. That's why
Yeah.
they invested them.
It's
That's one reason
crazy.
they sold off to Microsoft because they were like, we don't have enough data center power to do this. And I was surprised Microsoft said we don't either. We got to buy our nuclear power plant. Oh, so no, so yeah. The thing,
But
Yeah,
when
I
you
but
was,
isn't that like 4 different data centers and like $40 billion or $400 billion or some crazy number too,
yeah, it
with
was.
nuclear power and everything?
Yeah, I thought it was 400 million, but I could be wrong. But Microsoft, but all of them got that type of money. Man, you look at Microsoft's cap and Azure prints money. Same with AWS, they print money. People thought Amazon was making money. Amazon lost money for a decade. AWS web service floated the warehouses.
Yeah. Well, and Microsoft may be one of the only companies in the world that's even capable of deploying those kind of data centers and nuclear power and so forth with their connections and infinite money too. There
Yeah,
can't be
them and
that many.
Google.
Yeah.
Yeah, Google's in there. Shout out to
I'm
Google.
honestly surprised at how low Google's cloud really is. I've looked at Google Cloud off and on, um, and I mean they still have a lot of features in there. They're just not as popular.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
were.
they are. I think they're third in the market share.
Yeah, but they low though.
And yeah,
What was their percentage? You remember? You remember B2B?
it's changed now since this new year. I haven't looked at it since like 23,
Chris is typing
but
it
it was
up
low.
because I think AWS was 33. I thought Microsoft was 26. I want to say Google was under 10. What was it? What is it, Chris? I heard you typing vigorously
So
over there.
yeah, so as of November of 24, so AWS has 31% market share.
Woo, I
Azure
was
has a
right.
20%, and then
I was
Google Cloud has a 12.
okay. They higher than I thought they was. They creeping up. So
Yeah, man, they putting a lot of investment
mhm.
into getting more developers. Actually,
They got a
they
ton of
have it.
Fed rep
Mhm.
people too. They were looking for a lot of federal people to get their Fed work back up. But go ahead, B2B.
Yeah, they have like their cloud skill boost. So they're trying to make it like free for a lot of people to get some certificates and then
Facts.
make it easier for them to be able to like do labs. Like AWS and Azure, they have something similar, but not in the same way that Google does. They really do invest heavily into making more developers
They have
for
to.
the yeah, for their cloud services.
Yeah, they're trying to, because developers going to bring businesses and stuff. AWS had a 12, 14-year head start, man, before anybody came in. Then when Microsoft came in, they tricked everybody. It's like, we're going to take Outlook up in the cloud. Come on and join us. So they got the Office 365, PowerPoint, Word, all that shit's in the cloud. So that was their thing. So Google, so yeah. So yeah, I was close with my numbers. I think I was running off of 2023 numbers. 31. I think Azure is going to overtake AWS in the next 5 years.
Yeah, but look
Um,
at like the investment from companies like Netflix. They heavily invested in AWS.
Yeah, because they were
Actually, I think their
first.
whole infrastructure is based off of AWS.
It is, but that pissed AWS pissed them off because Netflix put it out there. Then what did AWS do? We see what you're doing. We're gonna do it. We're gonna do our Prime Video. So a lot of people like, I'm not gonna pay you to compete against me. Yeah. So and
um,
so they did that with a lot of services that pissed people off. Go ahead, Chris. What you chiming
Another
in?
thing I was going to mention here is that so as of 2024, it's an $84 billion business for cloud infrastructure, and they have had time and time again a plus 23% year over year. So at least a 23% growth every single year in the
Who?
cloud realm.
Azure, Azure or AWS?
The entire market,
Oh, the
it
entire
grows by
market.
23% year over year.
That's got to. Well, I would say I have to
That's
stop, but
crazy.
oh no, it's not. Everybody's trying to get there, man. The government, Google it. The government put out a $9 billion RFP 3 years ago. So I mean, they moving everything to the cloud. It's
I'm in,
just
I'm getting some cloud stock. That's what I'm doing.
it's too. Yeah. It's crazy. That's
Yeah,
people didn't
facts.
people didn't realize AWS was supporting Amazon. Everybody thought Amazon was losing money. AWS was printing money.
Hmm. Yeah, man. Even these like small companies investing into cloud. Like I had um a lot of small businesses here in Atlanta. They went to the Google Cloud. They had a summit here, and Google has an office here in Atlanta. So that may be their first experience to cloud technologies.
Hmm.
So you
Hmm.
see, because I think, was it like 90% of businesses are small businesses,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
you know? So you're gonna see a lot more like small startups using like Google, specifically based off of the market, like where they're located. Like
Oh.
even though Microsoft is still here in Atlanta, Microsoft and AWS is in Atlanta, but Google invests heavily into like the small businesses.
No, that's true. I think AWS and Azure going after the big dogs, the government, the billions, and that type of contract. So, like you said, there's a market in there for Google. For me, I did a risk assessment. That's been 10 years ago, but at first, Google was just horrible on their FedRAMP. Their federal stuff, but they got a lot better. They hired 1,000 people. This guy knew. I interviewed him on my channel. He used to work for Oracle. He's a security expert at Google. I was gonna try to get on at Google, and they start laying people off. I was gonna try to slide over there at Google, but um,
Yeah, everybody laying off, man.
yeah, I'm trying to stay put.
Yeah, Amazon, Microsoft, Google,
Yeah, everybody
Meta,
laying off.
all of them.
I think that's a really good mention though on like Google focusing more on smaller business or otherwise because I didn't think about that, but that does make sense. So
Yeah, that's their market. It's AWS and community college. Yeah, I used to teach at a community college for 10 years at Daly. So AWS was really just starting to pick up. So everybody's on that. Um, I just tell somebody pick a cloud and just go with it. Everything is kind of going to the cloud.
there's a lot of similarities between the different ones too. So even
Oh
if you
yeah.
learn Azure, you can go over to AWS,
Oh
with
fast.
some upskilling.
Oh
So
fast. Fast.
somebody recently asked me, what is the difference between a data center and a cloud, data center? What is the difference?
For
It
for
it had me stumped.
no, I think for from me when you go to especially AWS or Azure, um, they have cloud systems, and they specifically in AWS, they have availability zones. So what availability zones is in the East region, there are 6 data centers that's 150 miles apart from each other. You can fail over between those easily. Set up, click a button. In your own data center, you don't have that type of resilience. You have to build that in. Obviously,
Correct.
AWS built it in, but they built it in at such a high level. You get DR, you get AZ, the things we just went over. They got encryption keys and how they're tracking your data components. Most people are not doing that in their own data center at that level, right? So I think that type of federal compliance, you just don't see it. So I think that's the difference between a cloud vendor and people with their data center. You don't get that resiliency. You don't get that. Once again, you can click a button and set up a application load balancer. You got 6 data centers on a region. You can see which ones you fell over. If one of them go down, it automatically goes over to the other one. Each one of those data center AWS, they have different electric companies going to each one. So if one electric company goes down, it's not going to affect the whole. I was at the
Yeah.
state. Somebody cut a line in the front of the state. Our 2 of our data centers went down and we were scrambling, right? So
Yeah.
you went, so that type of availability with the CIA tried confidential integrity and availability, you just get that in abundance. Same thing with Azure. You get those data centers, you get failover, you click a button, you go from the east to the west coast. They have their own dark fiber, so you get milliseconds between those data centers. So you're not gonna get that with your own. You can't afford it. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe
the technology nowadays is just
uh,
insane.
I'm sure
Yeah,
maybe
the
Yeah.
IBM and Facebook in their data centers got that level. But if you just a normal $100 million company, your data center is not gonna be that at
yeah.
that level.
Yeah, but then also another point too is that it's more expensive, especially for like that redundancy, man.
Oh yeah,
And then for
Oh
like
yeah.
certain services,
yeah.
like you can have a data warehouse, but then they have like the other data warehouse has more availability.
Hmm.
It doesn't. is more scalable, doesn't fail over as well. It fails over to another region faster than the other one. So you have to
Listen,
pay for all those different things.
yeah, but it's still gonna be cheaper if you do it because they got economies of scale, right? So I mean, if
Yeah,
AWS and Azure, I mean, what they charge you for that level, you're not gonna be able to bill yourself at that level, not even close, because they splitting that among 10 million clients, right? So,
Well, at the end,
yeah,
at the end of the day, it's a competition of service. So I'm like, look, who's going to have the best service, cloud service, or what? You know what I mean? It's like Nike or Adidas, who's going to have that best cloud service? And then at the end of the day, it's business and business 101. My
and
competition.
and the government got infinite money, but they just couldn't keep up with the technology, so they just abdicated it to the big four. They put
Yeah,
out a $9 billion RFP for it. So that's the difference for me, Chris. You out? I'm about to shut it on
Yeah.
down.
yeah. I'm about to
Yeah,
shut up. I'm about to go take
Yeah,
it.
Yeah, I'm gonna
So,
jump in in a second. So
yeah.
basically, the gist of that conversation, I thought it was really, really insightful because their point was, oh, I've been in the industry for 30 years. We had automations back in 2000. That's no different than what we have now. The main difference between a data center and a cloud data center is automations. That's what it really
That,
comes down to, which I just didn't think about it that way previously.
yeah, but we had automation, but it sucks. I was doing that shit with batch shell. I was doing that shit with batch shell scripts, corn shell
Yeah.
script, and the level. I mean, if you're even AWS and Azure, they give you like 7 databases. Oh, Amazon's got 20 databases for you to choose from with a click of a button. So you can do best of breed a lot cheaper.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's it. And Kay, both they are not the same, Kay. They're not the same. I cannot run an Oracle database for the price I can run on AWS. Well, number one is I don't have the DBAs and the knowledge to run an Oracle database. That's high dollar stuff. They setting it up so you can just run a slice of that
yeah, good
and run it
evening.
off. I'll check you out. I'll check you out.
Good evening.
I appreciate you,
all
man.
right, you too, man.
So yeah, so I think Kay, they're not the same. That's incorrect. Because you cannot from your company you cannot run 20 databases effectively and be good at them, right? From a developer perspective, I can do my part. They got DBAs, they got uh, DevOps guys. I already said, got security guys setting it up for you. That is incorrect. They're not very far from the same. You're right. You can run an Oracle database, but you got to have the tech. You got to have the talent to run it. Then you can get Oracle, SQL Server, Mumps, uh, NoSQL. They got everything you want that you can pick from an AWS. You cannot run that in your own data center. You wouldn't have that level of talent or expertise in those different databases or those different services. You can pick from 100 services in AWS. You can't physically run that many in your own data center. Go ahead and chime in on that, B2B.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, oh my gosh, like running things on premise, it's so
Yeah,
many issues that come up, and then it's all managed by you.
yeah. You don't
Oh
have that.
man,
You don't have that level of talent. And why would you?
yeah.
Why would you want the expertise? So
And not even just talking about like just setting up the database. You also have other services as well that cloud provides for you. Like
run
like you can
run it.
have like a messaging or streaming, batch ingestion, and
Go
of course,
below.
mhm,
Just setting up the network. Just setting up a
yeah,
VPC network, and you managing those Cisco routers by yourself. Come on, man. No,
it's a
that's
lot of
incorrect,
work,
gang.
man.
Yeah, that's crazy. And you got to manage all that hardware, keep it up, and take
It's a
it.
lot of
That is incorrect.
security.
They are not the same, right? So
Yeah,
once
like I
again, that,
remember, I think you had told me about it too. Is even like let's say if you wanted to migrate data, like they bring out armed guards and everything to like
yeah.
protect you.
Yeah, if you can do the
You know,
you can do the semi. They got dark fiber, man. You can unless you running a something huge, you can run all that stuff straight from the from your server desktop.
Yep.
But no, okay, what was it? K, they are not the same. They are not the same as I was gonna say Kendrick Lamar. That might not be appropriate. We are not the same. I'm gonna shut it down. What's your last? Let's see what delays make. What's your last takes before we shut it on down?
Yeah, man, I
7:33.
just wanted to say thank you for having me up.
No, I
Um,
appreciate it.
I think that overall it just really highlights how, important these types of conversations are, these roles. Like when you talk about how hard it is for these companies to even finish this, like the compliance or to finish the paperwork. Like you have companies that would just hire talent just to be able to finish the paperwork,
Oh, facts, man. Yes.
so there's a lot of money in it. If people are interested in getting into it, I think that they should look further into some of these videos.
Oh, facts. I appreciate you. Yeah. Definitely gonna dig a little more into AWS, and there's a lot of things coming up, a lot of different channels to check out. But once again, everybody know I'm a NIST guy, compliance guy, security guy, so we definitely gonna dig into it. I
Yeah,
talk to you
yeah,
later.
PBO. I appreciate
I,
it, PBO. Talk
I
to you later.
appreciate it. I talk to you later, man. Delays Meg's gonna get the last question for today. Professor, how do you protect yourselves from ransomware if your cloud backup is also affected? Um, Hopefully, what you would do is when you do your cloud backup, you move that to a totally different region, and hopefully, from that particular region, you wouldn't be affected. And in that cloud backup, I would actually copy it to multiple regions, and one of those regions, I would keep like one region I would have a monthly backup. One region I would just copy it like every 6 months. So I would copy that. Then on top of that, because you're in the cloud, you can have the best malware, virus protection um, for your. And two is when you do your backup, it's called a S3 bucket. You can actually put version control on there. So once you copy it to that particular version control, you can never update it again, meaning a virus should have a hard time getting to it. Because once you copy that backup, it's kind of in a cloud or blob. It shouldn't be able to execute itself because that's not a regular operating system for the malware to be able to initiate itself. So that's what I would do. Delays made. Once again, if you do version, once you checking in, it's kind of like a cloud. It's never going. You can't update it, and it's hard for a virus or malware detection to get on that box because it's not regular. It's not a regular operating system. Security expert, you test your backups for data integrity malware. Up, no one does. But now, facts. I've actually had a long story short. When I was younger, we actually had our database went down. Then when we installed the backup, the actual tape drive, the head was cracked in the actual. We couldn't lay down the backup file, so we were struggling. So security expert is correct. You need to lay down your backups at least once every quarter and try to read them and install them somewhere. We got lucky though because it was a vSAN file, which means it's pretty much sequential. We laid it down about 6 times and kind of pieced them together. We kind of got lucky. So he is correct. Most people do not test their backup. They just assume their backup is good. Shout out to Chris doing big things. Check him out and study GRC. I'm over there all the time. Check him out in the Discord. I'm really over there supporting those guys doing big things. Once again, I want to thank everybody for joining me. PBO is gonna go. I appreciate that. Smash the like. PBO about to go to bed. He got to get up in the morning, doing some things. I appreciate it. And if you email me, give me a second. I need to get on my professorblackops@gmail.com. I'm about a week behind and get on those replies. I know I got to reach out to a couple people. A couple people asked me some questions. My bad. PBO's old. He gonna get to it though. Once again, I appreciate everybody for joining me. This is Late Night with PBO. I go live every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Um, I'm finishing up a course for Dr. Ozier, so once I get that done, we'll get back to at least streaming 2 or 3 times a week. So PBO is trying to get his NIST 800-53 course done. So I've been talking about that forever. I appreciate you for joining, Mr. Security Expert or Miss. I apologize. Definitely got you was dropping some straight gym specialty, test your backups. I lived through that personally, and I tell people a lot of times, I'm old. It's up in the cloud. Nobody can hack them. Even if it's up in the cloud, I put mine on a 10 terabyte uh, drive, and I'm gonna put it in a bank somewhere. Long story short, this financial company had backups. They put them on the other side of the country. The hacker got into their system and got to their backups, dropped both of them, and they had to shut down their company. It was a financial company. Google it. Their backups actually got dropped because they didn't secure them. So once again, I appreciate everybody for joining me. If you need me, put flash blackops at gmail.com. Once again, I'm actually in Study GRC Discord. If you need to reach me, I'm out. Everybody have a great night. Happy hump day. Let's get it tomorrow.